We'll discuss today also in our ongoing series about differences between commandments between man and God, a man and man. A very interesting and pragmatic issue is, where does the role of machshava and maisa hit? Where does the role of action and thought, are they interrelated? Do they play a role together? Does good thought on its own whole weight, or is it the action that's important?
Can I make a discussion I was having with Rabbi Hecht this last week? There's an amazing midrash. And briefly, Paro had three men on his National Security Council: Bilam,
Eov, and Yisro.
Yes. So, because you asked him what to do with the Jews. So each one the advice. They got Mida Keneged Mida. And Bilam said, throw the baby boys into the Nile, and eventually
killed the Jews.
And eventually he suffered grievously.
He was killed by the sword.
Yes. Okay. So next in line is Eov. He didn't want to get involved. He stayed quiet, and he suffered badly, as we all know. Now, but it was from this. Now, the third one, Yisro, very interesting. He hated what he saw, but didn't know what to do about it. So what did he do? He fled to Midian, and he got rewarded by his descendants became Sanhedrin. Yes. Now, if you think, what is between Eov and Yisro? According to at least the Medrash, is the version I know, it's not that Yisro argued with Paro, and Paro got furious and wanted to kill him, and he fled. As far as I know, neither of them said a word to Paro, but Eov stayed and Yisro fled. So as far as what happened to the Jews were concerned, there's no difference between them. It's just the attitude. Eov stayed in, Eov stayed in Memphis or Thebes, whatever the capital was, and Yisro fled off to Midian, got a good job there as Kohen Gadol. Okay, now, but the actions were identical. As far as effects on the Jews, but what apparently what was thought about it, it's tremendous. One was punished severely and one was rewarded. Okay, perhaps you'll comment on this.
Yeah,
Ben Adam L'Chaveru, I presume this is.
Right, but actually,
it's incredible. This I don't know what to make of it.
Because there are two aspects of, as we'll see, there's going to be a two-tiered aspect of Chesed, which we'll see if we'll get to today or not, but we'll touch on that point. So there's a famous Gemara in Nazir where the Gemara talks about, again, the case, I'm just giving a hypothetical, but this is, let's say a woman takes a neder, a woman as in a wife takes a neder that she's going on a diet, there's no ice cream, no cake, no whatever, you could fill in, no chocolate. And then, okay, she's doing well, then on whether it's a couple of minutes later, a couple of days later, a couple of weeks later, she just is tempted and she just goes for the chocolate, in violation of the neder. She took a neder, and a vow not to eat chocolate. But unbeknownst to her was, a husband already annulled, a husband knew the wife well, and the husband already annulled the neder. So therefore, in actuality, she didn't violate anything because there was no neder. So basically, she had a machshava ra. She had a bad thought, not that the chocolate was the bad thought, it's the fact that she made the neder and she wasn't keeping it. She made a machshava ra, but the end result, there was no avera per se. She didn't actually violate the neder. Yet the pasuk says, the Gemara quotes, Hashem yislach la, that God will forgive you. In other words, the point is she needs atonement. In other words, not that she won't get it, but it wasn't like it was nothing. Hashem yitzrach la, she had to be forgiven. So,
if she did it and the husband hadn't been much of the neder, she'd still have to do atonement. So what's the difference?
The big difference. One case, because that wouldn't be a chiddush. You wouldn't have to tell me that. If anyone who violates the neder, so you needed someone ate treif, so you need atonement. So that's no chiddush. The chiddush is here that even though she didn't actually do a maisa, she didn't actually do the action which is prohibited, yet the Torah itself says she needs atonement.
I thought she did.
Okay, right.
The chiddush is actually...
Right. So we see from here that a machshava ra, even though if you were thinking to do an aveira and you did, so you need atonement. So we see a machshava by itself does need atonement from this Gemara.
She wouldn't have to get makkos, assuming that people...
Yeah, there's no makkos. She didn't violate the neder. Whatever the punishment for neder would be, that's if she violated the neder. Here she didn't. And yet we know the famous Gemara in Kiddushin, Machshava Ra Eino Mitzdaref L'maisa. We have an apparent contradiction from another Gemara that when the person has a bad thought, we don't Mitzdaref L'maisa, we don't count it. Only if you do a bad deed, then we count it. But if you're just thinking a bad deed, don't worry about it. So it seems to be an apparent contradiction in the Talmud. In one place it seems to say you need atonement for a bad thought, and from the Gemara in Kedusha we see you don't. So how do you reconcile? So there are many ways. One is, this simple pshat is, it says, you're right, Machshava Ra Eino Mitzdaref L'maisa. A bad thought does not count like a bad deed, but it's still a bad thought, and you still need a lower level of atonement than you would. But we're not saying it's equal to doing the bad deed. It's a lower form. That's how some learn. Or, as the famous Brisker Rav on this, the Brisker Rav points out, along the lines of the 10th commandment in the Aseret HaDibros, there's a prohibition of lo sachmod, not to covet, not to desire someone else's property, or someone else's wife, etc. So the Rambam has a very interesting categorization of it. He says there are three levels. He says, if you're walking down the street and you see this car, wow, I really want this car, or this person has a nice iPhone, or whatever's on your mind these days, physically speaking, so then that's nothing. It's not an Aveira. That, maybe you should work on your midos, and you shouldn't be jealous of other people have, but that's nothing. That's just a midos issue. Lo sisava is that you see someone has something you want, and you make a plan of attack. You plan, but you don't actually do it. You think of, this is how I'm going to get it, but you don't end up doing it. That's lo sisava. And the highest level, or the worst level in this case, is to actually plan the attack and actually take it. That's lo sachmod. So the Rambam, that's just the fact. So the problem is, the Rambam writes, lo sachmod is a lav she'ein bo maisa. It's a negative commandment that doesn't involve an action. And therefore there's no punishment, there's no makis, there's no good old-fashioned whipping for it. So the question is, he just contradicted himself, the Ravid asked. He just finished saying, the only time I'm obligated, the only time I violate lo sachmod, dosha not desire or kavet, is if I actually take the object. And the next breath he says, you know why there's no punishment? Because it's a negative commandment that doesn't involve an action. So which one is it? You hear the question or not? So the famous Brisker Rav, the Stipler, they all say the same Brisker Lumdis is, no, really, it's a prohibition in the heart. Lo sachmod is a machshava. However, how do I know how? Because machshava is hard to measure. We don't have a measuring stick when you do an action that's more objective. Like a tzaddik is more of a judgment call from our point of view. There is an objective standard, but from us we don't. A Torah scholar, you ask them questions, you figure it out. You can give them some test, you can give someone how much they know, but how righteous they are, it's harder to tell. It's hard for humans to tell. So same thing here, machshava, no one knows what anyone's thinking. So how do we know you've gone too far when you actually took the object? But it's not that the sin isn't taking the object, the sin is the sin in the heart. But when do you violate that sin in the heart? That's when that's where you see your chimud, your desire was so strong, it made you actually act on it. So even though, and therefore there's no makis, because the sin wasn't the actual, because in fact, if you get someone else to take it for you, that's still lo sachmod, even though you didn't do the act. The point is, it's an isser. So similarly they say here, that it's true over here as a machshava ra, but you did a maisa. The woman ate the cookies or cake or it was mutter, but so what? It was. When does the Gemara say a bad thought doesn't need any atonement? That's if all it was. It remains a thought, a mere thought. But when you acted on it, albeit at the end, it was a permitted act, but the act's not important. The act shows that your machshava was strong enough, like those sakbon, and you do need an atonement. That's how the Brisker Rav explains.
As far as with lo sachmod, though, when it says it's specifically on Ishes Re'echa, on your friend's wife, right? That you shouldn't cover your friend's wife or things, right? But as opposed to like his property, because with property you have a rectification of Hashedes Gzela. You could return the stolen product that you took from him. So whatever it is, let's say you coveted it, but does that wipe out the Lo Sachmod issue? Like, does it? If you return,
No, even
you
if
still
you
have that Isser on you.
even when you steal, there's a separate. You violated Gezela, but you still have another mitzvah. Yeah, that's the reason why there's no onish. There's no punishment because it could be rectified, but it doesn't take away that you did something wrong.
Right.
But here the Rambam gives a different reason. He says because it's a lav shein bo ma'isa, not because it's a lav shenitach liaseh. All right. So,
but I'm sorry, just connect with Rabbi's question. It seems that when you grab the person's iPhone and pull it toward, there are two availers. One is Lo Tzachmud Lo, and the other is Gneva or Gezela.
no, but this, Gezela is something else. Here,
I mean, they just two.
right, it could be that you might be over Gezela also.
Yes.
But the Chiddush is Lo Sachmod. That your thought, but you desiring someone else's, because here, one's an Issa Machshava, Gezela is an Issa Gezela isn't thinking about someone else, thinking about, like the Kutzker used to say, a Lamdin isn't someone who knows how to learn, it's someone who does learn. A Gazlan isn't someone who knows how to steal, someone who steals. Do you ever go on?
The implication is that every action is based on thought. Is that necessarily so? Is that the corollary of this?
In terms of the Lo Sachmod?
Yeah.
No, but I don't know we'll see. I don't know if it's every action, but here specifically we're talking about there was a plan of attack. Because here a person was planning, it wasn't like, there's a difference. We have premeditated or other things, not always, I agree with you. In this case, Lo Sachmod is a case where, since it's an Isser in the Machshava, so obviously that or else it wouldn't be Lo Sachmod, and then that's a regular case of the stealing. In other words, it has to be for Lo Sachmod, the issues in the heart, and the Rambam spells out the order. Right, but doesn't mean you didn't think, you just walked by, you saw you steal it. That's nothing to do with Lo Sachmod, but you still violated. So they're not correlated all the time. Lo Sachmod, the Chiddush of Lo Sachmod is the action reveals that your thoughts have gone too far. If you didn't have any thoughts before, then we're dealing with a different issue. Impulsive stealing, you just walked in, you saw it, right, that's something else. Right.
Which may also be a reason why the focus might be just on the action, because it takes away this whole discussion about knowing someone's thoughts or lack of
Absolutely.
thoughts. So therefore it's very... See, trying to make a continuum here, when it isn't, arguably, it's binary. You do it or you don't do it, period.
Right.
As opposed to saying there's a continuum from beginning to think about it, to logically thinking about it, to formulating a plan of action, to actually going over the edge and doing it. Why make it a continuum? Just make it binary.
Exactly. In fact, that's the famous, with the Rambam we have it's a famous question the Mefarshim ask is, how does the Torah only imposes actions on us? How could a person control their thoughts? That's it's a famous question of the evidence. So there are answers, but with the Rambam there's no question. The Rambam is saying, no, it has to do, you have to take it. So that takes a major question in certain mitzvahs. How could the Torah impose different on what we're thinking, if we don't, if we have control of what we're thinking, maybe in an ideal sense, if we worked on ourselves, but with reality we can't. So with the Rambam, it's not a question. The Rambam obviously was bothered by that, and he said, no, you have to be in action. Yeah. We live in the world of the Ma'aseh, and it has to be in action. Someone else was saying, right? So that's another way of answering. But getting back, we have an apparent contradiction. So we have on one hand, one Gemara says that a bad thought without an Aveira still requires a form of atonement, maybe a lesser form. And another Gemara says you have a bad thought, but you don't do it. Machshava ra, there is no atonement. So we gave different answers. Now we'll give a third approach to further our discussion we've been having up until now. So there's a famous Klei Chemda. He's one of the famous commentators on Chumash. He's known as a Pilpul Sefer. He quotes different Gemaras and a lot of different things, and he ties it all together. So he says he raises the same question, but from a different angle. We know at the end of Parshas Vayechi, when when Yosef and the brothers are talking, and the Joseph tries to make them feel good at the end. Well, don't worry, even though your machshavas, your thoughts might have been for the bad, selling me, you're upset, jealous, but the bottom line, God had his own plan. Everything worked out for good, so let's just be friends now. In other words, and that's what paraphrasing the Chumash there. So Orach Chaim writes that we see from here that even though the brothers had bad intentions, nevertheless, since that's ultimately they didn't cause any harm to Yosef, it turned out to be good, so they don't need atonement. Like someone who tries to harm their friend but doesn't. They think they're giving him something harm, but they end up giving something good, so there's no atonement. So we see from this Orach Chaim writes explicitly that if you have bad intentions, but ultimately it comes out good, no atonement necessary. Against the Gemara in Nazir, which we said a woman who thinks she can't eat the chocolate because she took a neder, but she didn't know and she violated, even though her husband already took care of it, nevertheless it's not like violating the neder, but she needs a form of atonement. How do we reconcile the Orach Chaim seems to go against the Gemara? In the Orach Chaim he says there's no atonement necessary, yet the Gemara in Nazir says you do. So the Klei Cham, the answer is as follows. He says, we know there's a famous Gemara, of course we know because we've discussed it before, we know there's a famous Gemara in Menachos about someone fishing on Shabbos. So we've talked about it in different contexts of Shabbos emergencies, but the case is someone's fishing on Shabbos, he's a regular fisher on Shabbos, and we know fishing on Shabbos, assuming you're successful, that's some advantage not being a good fisherman. But assuming you're successful, you can violate the biblical prohibition of trapping. Because it's one of the 39 prohibited activities. So let's say, lo and behold, he's doing his fishing, and as he picks up to get his fish, he finds a little baby that just fell off the shore, and he saved the child's life. So on one hand, it's true, his intention was Chilul Shabbos. I don't know if his intention was or not, but let's assume it was. He knew what he was doing. He was desecrating the Shabbos. Yet, ultimately, he did a mitzvah. He saved someone's life. So on this specific fishing episode, is it a mitzvah? Is it an aveira? How do we view this specific act of fishing?
Who asks this?
The Gemara.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Wouldn't you view them as two separate?
Well, that's another. Maybe it's both. But we'll see. So that's the Gemara says. The issue is, do we go basar maisa or basar machshava? Do we go by the act, or do we go by the machshava? Or do we go by what?
Why not both?
But we'll see. But I'm saying that's the mafarshim. But I'm just going to get the Gemara down. So the Gemara says that do you go by the act, or do you go by the machshava? So the Gemara says. So in fact, it's a discussion Rava. So it's obvious that what's the difference? The difference is if you go by the act, so he did a mitzvah, hatzalas nefashos, he saved the child's life. If you go by the machshava, it's Chilul Shabbos. So that's the Gemara's discussion there, and they entertain maybe how they both fit into one another. But that's not our topic for the moment. So comes along the Klei Cham and says this whole discussion in the Gemara, whether we go basa maisa or whether we go basa machshava, that's only on commandments ben adam lamakom. That's only on commandments between man and God. Then we can entertain what you're thinking. Then perhaps a machshava ra, we can discuss maybe that's really bad. But when it comes to commandments ben adam l'chaveiro, when it comes to interpersonal, who cares about your machshava? We care about the bottom line. You saved this person's life, and therefore you'll even be rewarded for your action. In other words, we see from the Klei Cham along the lines that many say is that there's a fundamental difference between commandments between man and God and man on man. When it comes to commandments to man and God, the focus is on the machshava, on the specific act. Like the Torah is concerned, shake the lulav, eat the matzah, or don't cook. It's not the eating the cooked food that's the problem. The Torah is makbid on either on the thought or on the act.
Does this have something to do with the fact that God can know your thoughts, but another man cannot?
Absolutely. And however, when it comes to be'adam l'chaveiro, It's all about the totzah. It's all about the result. For instance, there's a halacha on Shabbos. If you violate Shabbos indirectly through a grama, so you're not labeled machal Shabbos biblically at all. To violate Shabbos biblically, you have to actually do that prohibited act. However, if you cause someone else's death, you hire a mercenary, you tie them up in the jungle, and you have the lion eat them. Even though you might not get capital punishment, you are labeled a murderer. How come when I do an indirect murder, I'm labeled a murderer, but when I do an indirect chilul Shabbos, I'm not labeled? Because when it comes to the keeping Shabbos, the Torah is concerned on the act. It's not the result of what happens afterwards. The Torah says I can't do X, Y, and Z. So if I don't do it, even though I get that, I circumvent other ways, so maybe rabbinically it's prohibited, but biblically speaking, I'm not labeled a machal Shabbos. But when it comes to be'adam l'chaveiro, murder, I don't care if you don't care if the person was killed by the sword, by bow and arrow, or machine gun. You care if he's dead or not. So when it comes to be'adam l'chaveiro, we're more concerned with the result. In fact, that's how he explains why there's no bracha on a mitzvah be'adam l'chaveiro. Because we gave different reasons, but he says, what's the reason behind a bracha? One of the reasons is it prepares you. You have kavanah to prepare. You have kavanah for the action. I'm about to put on tefillin, talis, matzah, whatever I'm doing. The purpose of the bracha is to prepare. In fact, that was the Nod B'Yehuda's tain on the Hasidim, was saying, "Hini muchel nezumu l'kayim." He said, "What do you have to add on new things to prepare?" The rabbis gave us a bracha. That's the time to prepare before the mitzvah. You don't have to go make up your own preparations. But the purpose of the bracha is to give you the kavanah. So when it comes to mitzvahs be'adam l'makom, we paskin mitzvah srichas kavanah, so a bracha fits in. Be'adam l'chaveiro, forget your kavanah, just get the act done. In fact, maybe the bracha will take away from what you're doing, and therefore when it's be'adam l'chaveiro, it's a totzah. So then machshava, I won't say plays no role, but plays a much lesser role. It's the result that we're concerned about, and that's how the Klei Chamda explains. When it comes to the case of a neder, which is a be'adam l'makom mitzvah, so then the machshava plays a role. God cares. You said you were in violation, and you told me you're not going to do it. Now you're doing it. You planned on doing it. That's bad. Mm-hmm. But when it comes to mechiras Yosef, you can have all the bad thoughts you want. If ultimately you saved Klal Yisrael, you did good things, so we're not so concerned about your bad when it's done, because the person only cares about, like they say, I think they say, a bearish tova, like there's a fly on your back, a bear comes by and kills the fly and breaks your back. Don't do me any favors. I'm allowed to keep my back, and machshava tovas that we don't care about. That's why I think there's an expression, good intentions is the gateway to Gehenna. So that applies to be'adam l'chaveiro. Be'adam l'makom, intentions play a more critical role. But be'adam l'chaveiro, it's the result we're more concerned about. Yeah.
You spoke about Gram on Shabbos. Now I was discussing with somebody, and he quoted me a Gemara, something like this. Grama benezikim chayav, something like that.
Yeah,
that seems to go the other way.
Well, right. Well, see, because that's a good question. There's grama garmi, but that's not our topic for today. But
okay.
That's that would be the exception to the rule, not the rule. But we'll discuss that.
Maybe sometime I'd like to hear. Yes.
So, too quickly, it seems to me that the example you gave of the guy fishing, you're dealing with both kinds of issues. Chavera against God when it comes to breaking Shabbat, and a mitzvah for man when he saves the baby. So it seems a curious example to give, because one seems to be related to one and one to the other.
Yes.
So at the same time as he's doing a mitzvah, Adam Lechavero, he's also doing a Avera.
Correct. It's a very good point. So what do we see from the Gemara, alluding to your question, is obviously the Gemara, why doesn't the Gemara say both? So obviously the Gemara is viewing it as one act. The Gemara is not viewing it as two separate things.
Well, how does it decide?
No, right. So then the Gemara, then that's the discussion. The Gemara, how we determine what the act is, but from the Gemara, from the simple reading of the Gemara, if he's saying Basa Maisa, it's not that there's two things, is you did an act of Pikuach Nefesh, there was no Chilul Shabbos, there is no Be'adam L'makom going on. And if you say it's Basa, that's how it seems to Gemara, to answer your question you asked, as opposed to saying, well, or you could say maybe it's both happening, but the greater mitzvah of Pikuach Nefesh supersedes, that gets into the question of Hutra, the Chuya, but those assumptions are depending on how you view two acts that coincide.
The thing is making a donation with money that you just raised as being a mobster.
Right, right, that's different issue than, right, then also,
Tainted money, that's
right, tainted as opposed to stealing money, but right.
But it's your stolen money.
Exactly, right, so, exactly, so, like Robin Hood. Right, I'm saying it's your,
Yeah,
right.
Robin Hood.
Yeah, so it has to do,
Would he have to do tshuva, Robin Hood?
but,
Well, that's the question.
Yes.
no, right,
He's a
no,
gunner. He had to do tshuva.
no, but it's, right, but it's, right,
That's a gunner.
but there,
But the outcome.
It's a
no,
gunner. You feel.
I know, but the time is, but the case is different. The time you're giving the tzedakah, you have good intentions and you're doing good deed. There wasn't the problem was before. It wasn't the act when you're doing. It's not like you're having a bad machshava when you're giving the tzedakah. In that case, right? Then you'll have to then give a din and cheshbon on whether that was appropriate what you did before. But kind of like if someone carries a box of matzah on Shabbos without an Erev and it's Machal Shabbos, and he eats that matzah the night of Pesach, there's no connection. You have to do tshuva on your desecration of Shabbos, but you fulfilled your mitzvah of matzah. I mean, right, in terms of that. So we see that. So the Klei Chamda is going along the lines we've been explaining up until now. When the Gemara talks about mitzvah sfichas kavana, it's always about commandments between man and God. It's all about shofar, matzah, lulav. When it comes to be'em l'chaveiro, the ikar is the totzah, is the result, and that's how I explained the apparent contradiction as well. That we said when it came to the bones of Yosef taken out of Mitzrayim, even though physically Moshe took them out, but the pasuk in Yoshua gives credit for Bnei Yisrael for taking them out. So the one who finishes the mitzvah gets credit. Yeah, we're going to say in davening shortly, Mizmar Shir Chanukas Habayis LeDavid. We give credit for David for building the Beis Hamikdash, not Shlomo. David started it, Shlomo finished it. How do we reconcile? So there are many answers, but the one I'm giving is to fit it is because Atzmos Yosef Kfura is the ultimate commandment between Ben Adam and Chaveiro. So when it comes to Ben Adam and Chaveiro, it's the result that counts. Yosef wouldn't have been happy if you took my bones out and left them in the desert. Don't do me any favors. Make sure you get me into a cemetery. Make sure you bury me. So the one who finishes the Ben Adam and Chaveiro, that's the one that gets credit. When it comes to Ben Adam L'Makom, God knows your machshavas. David HaMelech's whole life he was yearning. So then when it comes to the world of Ben Adam L'Makom, so then that's fine. And I like to add to it as well, since we're about to put on tefillin, that's also the concept of tefillin shel yad and tefillin shel rosh. That someone to point out that tefillin shel yad represent commandments ben adam l'chaveiro, and the tefillin shel rosh represent tefillin. Well, what's the connection? Because the hand represents action, and obviously your head represents machshava. Therefore, and that's why, based on this, if you haven't noticed, maybe you'll notice now since I'm telling you about to put them on, and that if you notice, you never left with just the tefillin shel rosh, or if you are, you're doing something wrong. But you never should be left with this the tefillin on your head. You put on your arm, you tie, you leave a little left, you put on your head, then you finish the job. And when you take it off, you take off your head, then your arm. Why is it? So the Bali Machshava point out, why is it that you never left only because when a person, of course, to be a complete Jew, as we mentioned, you need both commandments between Ben Adam L'Makom and Ben Adam L'Chaveiro. But if you want to start taking on chumras, you want to take on extras, where should one begin? Once you begin with not speaking Lashon Hara, not to be bad to people, you should begin with the other. You have to ground yourself on the Ben Adam L'Chaveiro. That's why we never left just with Ben Adam L'Makom. You start off, you ground yourself with the tefillin shel yad, and then once you're ready, then you move to the tefillin again. I don't mean the basic mitzvah that everyone has to keep no matter what, if you're ready or not. But in terms of working on the extra things, so the focus first has to be on the Ben Adam L'Chaveiro. You ground yourself, and then you left. And as we said, because the rosh represents the machshava, and then just to get you ready for next week, I don't want to. So even though we've been focusing now on the issue, the ikar of the Ben Adam L'Chaveiro is the result, and your machshava doesn't play any role. I don't really want to leave you on that note, because your machshava and the Ben Adam L'Chaveiro plays a tremendous role as well. Because Gemilas Chasadim is a two-tiered. Well, we could change the words, but even within the realm of Ben Adam L'Chaveiro, there's a Ben Adam L'Makom aspect, and a benam l'chavero aspect. Even up now we've been, because even in benam l'makom you have different things. But what do I mean is, let's say there's a mitzvah of chesed, let's say versus a mitzvah of tzedakah. There's a fundamental difference between the two. That the Gemara tells us in Sukkah in 3 ways chesed is greater than tzedakah. Tzedakah can only be given to the poor, chesed to the rich and the poor. Tzedakah only to the living, chesed to the living and the dead, and tzedakah only with money, but chesed with bodily exertion. So that's quantitatively. The Maharal writes qualitatively there's a more fundamental difference. It's tzedakah is a more of an outward midah. In other words, basically you're walking down the street, a pauper comes over and says, do you have any change, do you have any money, or you get a letter in the mail, someone does you a favor, they knock on your door, whatever it might be, and they ask you for tzedakah, so you're a good person, you feel for the person, you give tzedakah, a tremendous mitzvah of tzedakah. But where did it originate from? You weren't necessarily thinking about giving tzedakah. You walked by the right place, someone, you got a letter, so you got a phone call, you get an email, whatever it might be, someone approaches you directly, so then you respond to a situation, but it wasn't inherent, it was something that came up. Masha'en Ken Chesed is, I have to do a good deed. The question is, who am I going to do it to? I need a release. I don't care if it's going to be to Tom, Bill, Henry, whoever it is. So that's what's the source of Chesed? We learned in the beginning of Vayera, that when God was talking to Avram, and he was doing Bikur Cholim, so Avram said, sorry, I have to go now, I have to take care of these 3 strangers. Now from here we learn how greater is the mitzvah of entertaining guests. See, it's not like other religions where it's a conflict. That's how you become closer to God. You become closer to God by doing Haknasas Archem than you do even perhaps by speaking to God directly. But what do we see from the example? The Torah goes into great detail. It's interesting to note that when Avram does other chasadim with people, it doesn't go into, the example with the angels is the whole beginning of Vayera, because what's the purpose of chesed? It wasn't for the angels, they don't eat. It was Avram. It's a waste of time. Why am I doing all this time to give you food? The answer is, it's not a waste of time. It's for me. Chesed is an inward meter. It's all about me trying to be like God, imitating, doing acts. So ultimately we'll see there's another part of Chesed that has everything to do with my machshava, and nothing to do. We were focusing on the result part, but there's another world of Chesed, nothing to do with the result. It has to do with all about your intentions. But I guess we'll have to continue.